Professor Dr. Noor Amali Mohd, Daud, respected lecturers, Dr. Amila Ibrahim, and our respected guests. Before we begin our seminar today, let us recite Surah Al-Fatihah to invoke the blessings of Allah, and may Allah grant us with His mercy and rewards. Al-Fatihah. So I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to our third of seminar Kalam, Renewal and Contemporary Issues. Until now, there has been 3 sessions of our Kalam since 9 November. Today we are having our third session for the seminar Kalam, and we will be having the last, which is the 4th session. I mean, this is the last of seminar next week, which we will be having. The last will be next week with Associate Professor Dr. Ismail. With that, I would like to firstly invite Dr. Amran Muhammad, the current CEO of ISI, to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, sisters. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, amin. Assalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wasahbihi ajma'in. Our dear speaker, Dr. Haslina Ibrahim, and Dr. Noor Amali, Head of Department, Suluddin in Comparative Religion, Dr. Amila, my friends, this is staff. Thank you very much for coming to this morning session. It's our third session actually. Actually, our aim in this program or project is to revive ilmu kalam as an important discipline to revive Muslim thought in this current in our present day world. We think we face a great challenge in iman, in ideologies, in all new sciences, modern sciences. So we need a tool to engage, if not to Islamize the sciences. At least the first stage we need to engage. We need to know the challenge that we face. So one of the key dimension is Kalam project is about inter-religious dialogue and studies, which we believe is part of the Kalam tradition. So we would like actually to bring back comparative religion, sign of other religion as Kalam in the Kalam fold actually. Yeah? So we work with several universities here like IIUM and UKM, and I think Dr. Haslina is very important for us in this project, and we hope this morning she will continue enlighten us how comparative religion can be properly put within our Kalam discipline as a proper Islamic tradition. So that is my introduction. I hope you can listen from Dr. Haslina this morning. Thank you very much.
So as we informed, the speakers for today's seminar are Associate Professor Dr. Canal, she will present on Unravelling the Confusion of Religious Pluralism, Kalam Perspective, and Associate Professor Dr. Amali Mohd, Daud, he will discuss a survey on the development of Kalam in the Islamic tradition. Without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to our first speaker of today's session, Associate Professor Dr. Haslina Ibrahim, to deliver his presentation entitled Unravelling the Confusion of Religious Pluralism.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Thank you very much, Sister Shufaira, Dr. Amran, our sponsor, Dr. Amila, my head of department, my friend, my colleague, is Shakira here is here, yeah? And everybody lah in the room. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yasmin pun ada. Yeah, Alhamdulillah. You first year student, Alhamdulillah, good. So thank you very much for Dr. Amran for having me. Though I have plenty on my plates actually, Dr. Amran, not knowing which one to take first, yeah, when you have so much in your plates. But Alhamdulillah. First of all, let me make some clarifications. I have presented quite a number of papers on religious pluralism to the extent that when you are dealing with something again and again, I thought that somehow I have that mental block already, and it is not good for academic pursuit because there is always fresher way of looking at an issue. Well, recently I developed a new fresher way of understanding pluralism, but still, in my opinion, I would not move away from my stand, my position, which I developed since I work on religious pluralism for my PhD thesis way back in 2000. So up to now, I am yet to convince with religious pluralism, even though recently I told you that I have a new, fresher perspective of religious pluralism. Secondly, for the past 2 days, I've been very busy with students' programs, so I did not have much time to actually revisit my paper and my slides. So please forgive me if I'm a bit disorientation, especially when playing with the slides. So that is a disclaimer for my mistake. Anyway, so whenever I spoke about religious prism, I told you just now I've been presenting a number of times on religious prism. When I try to match with Dr. Amran's interest, EC interest, and of course my interest as well, I add the Kalam perspective. This is something new that I am doing in my presentation today. Yeah, so it's quite. So it is my attempt to see how this modern philosophy to be evaluated and analyzed using the so-called what we perceive as very classical, very traditional. Yeah. So you see, I have traditional glasses looking into modern philosophy. Would that be compatible or not? Will I be regarded as biased? Yeah, normative. We have been talking about that just now. Yeah, Dr. Amran said normative is an evil term because you give it a very negative meaning. Like, what I mean by normative is that whether this is right or wrong, and whether this concern about right and wrong is compatible in the study of religion or comparative religion. Actually, that's the whole issue of comparative religion, which is hampering us Muslim scholars doing comparative religion actually. Yeah, whether it is possible for us to say A is right, B is wrong or not, because in comparative religion you are expected to be what they call as very objective, descriptive, and neutral. So you cannot pass judgment. Now, when I say I'm using Kalam to evaluate or to analyze religious pluralism, I will stand firm on my ground that I will say what is right and what is wrong. Because in my impression, Kalam is the science that helps us to verify the truth. This is what I've been developing in my recent article, intellectual veracity. Whether you like it or not, you have to have that veraciousness, right, wrong, true or not true, which is not so much appreciated, especially in comparative religion. Okay, what is religious pluralism? People have been, using this term again and again. In Malaysia, politicians like this term very much because they thought that this would help to address the needs of the people. Okay, let's take a look. Where does this philosophy come about? Yeah, so I said there, I put in my slides there. It's a modern philosophy. So when I say modern, I hope most of you are postgraduate students. Yasmin, I hope you can follow. when we talk about modern, you have in your mind a certain period. And what is the whole lot about this very big term, modern philosophy, and then you have modernism as an ideology. So it's a very heavy loaded term. When I say modern, I hope you can understand what I mean. Somehow it is interesting that even though modernity perhaps started off in maybe 17th, 18th century, but then this philosophy emerged at the brink of 20th century, towards the end of the 20th century until today. So it surfaced quite late in the modern history. And it is also interesting, which I found very interesting also, that those who came with this philosophy were not sociologists or psychologists, all these modern philosophers, scientists, but this philosophy came from theologians. As I said just now, if I mention modern philosophy, modernism, you know how theology was during this time. Was it appreciated? Yeah. So it came from Christian theologians significantly. We cannot omit this fact, a very subtle fact that back up religious pluralism. It is a philosophy coined by Christian theologians. So it comes from the background of Christianity, and these theologians were modern theologians who were exposed, who studied comparative religion, who were themselves philosophers, who were themselves sociologists, they were historians, and they were also exposed with modern philosophy. Even though they were theologians, they graduated from seminaries, they studied philosophy, and they taught at universities. So they were quite versatile in that sense. They were not pure theologian, traditional Christian theologian. They were modern theologians who appreciate religion, Christianity for that matter. Yeah. Now, the problem with those theologians was that, having graduated from religious school, just like all of us here, so they have been taught that the truth that is only found in Christianity. Yeah? So the doctrine of extra ecclesiam nulla salus in Catholicism, the doctrine of sola fide, sola gratia, solus Christus, soli Deo gloria. What else? What does extra ecclesiam nulla salus mean? No salvation outside the church. Okay, that is propagated in Catholicism. Sola fide means faith alone justifies, or grace alone justifies, scripture alone justifies, which actually means if you want to find salvation, you can only find it in Christianity. So this has been the theology or the understanding of those Christian theologians when they were at the seminaries especially. Yeah? But when they came to the universities, they were given different orientation altogether. So they studied philosophy, they studied comparative religion, and they had the chance to encounter people of different religions. Yeah? And that brought John Hick and Wilfred Cantwell Smith to pioneer this idea of religious pluralism. Yeah? Before John Hick, I could not recall the scholar who came with this term religious pluralism before John Hick, but he did not coin the philosophy the way John Hick did. But John Hick excellently formulated this philosophy and developed its sophisticated argument. And Hick also was very much influenced by Wilfred Cantwell Smith. Why Hick's influence was influenced by him? Because he benefited when Wilfred Cantwell Smith challenged the Western conception of knowledge, of religion altogether, in his very important book, The Meaning and End of Religion. Yeah? So I'll talk about this also later, but at this point it's enough for me to, the way I see this philosophy, it has its roots in the Christian context, Western context, and it is a heavy loaded philosophy inspired by the Christian theology. And of course, this philosophy found its ways because by the time Hick was there, study of religions have developed itself in numerous versions. So you have the School of Religion, Wissenschaft, and then you have History of Religion, you have Phenomenology of Religion, Sociology of Religion, Psychology of Religion, and all those sorts of sophisticated modern sciences that deal with religion from particular perspective, or what I should say, reductive perspective. You study religion either from the perspective of psychology or sociology, so on and so forth. Okay, and then we have globalization, which makes religious pluralism even more attractive, idea. All right. So when I say I'm going to use the glasses of Kalam, I hope you understand what I'm trying to share. If you're not comfortable with what I mentioned just now, normativity, I think we can differ on that. But I'm going to use these glasses to help me to understand what is it religious pluralism trying to offer. Okay, these are the three things I found very pertinent to the core of religious pluralism, that you cannot escape from discussing this, regardless of whether you think that, religious pluralism only means religious plurality. So as a researcher, I found that it's very unfair for me to simply suppress these three important issues when discussing religious pluralism. So first is the question of the ultimate truth. Yeah. Secondly, the question of salvation, and thirdly, the questions of plurality of religions, or the many religions. Now, let's see how Kalam deal with all these three main issues in religious pluralism. Yeah. So if you look at these questions of ultimate truth, yeah, using the glasses of Kalam, I found that the whole discourse of truth is very much what you call the core business of Kalam, discussion about God. Yeah? Discussion about God. So you see, the problem of ultimate truth in religious pluralism can be analyzed under the discourse of Kalam when Muslim mutakalim talks about who is God. Who is God? Yeah? And then the question of salvation. How does we match this with the discourse of Kalam? The question of man. Because salvation talks about the destiny of man. Yeah, so in Kalam we talk a lot about the destiny of man, about his action, whether he is predetermined, whether he is free or not. Yeah? So that determines his end. Yeah? So salvation talks about your end. Yeah? And finally, the many religions, which is also another important themes or issues in Kalam, which is nature. Yeah? Al-Kauno. Because Al-Kauno consists of diverse entity. Okay? So you have God, man, and nature. If you read the modern works on worldview, on frameworks of on worldview, especially on the philosophy of understanding the world, then you find that man will discuss his three, or scientists or scholars will discuss his three things: God, man, and nature. Inshallah, this is the whole lots what Kalam has been propagating. Yeah? So that's why I think, for me, I would prefer to look at these three issues in religious pluralism using the glasses of Kalam. Okay. Now, let me also deliberate or illustrate my point using this chart. I'm farsighted. Let me see my text here. So I hope you can see. Sorry about the small font there. I cannot help. So for example, you see, I put the Kalam and religious pluralism, these three issues: God, man, and nature. Now let's take a look. The discussion of God in Kalam. What permits or what highlighted under this conception of God, yeah, al-ilah. Yeah. So we have the question about who is God, who is the ultimate, what about God's knowledge, what about God's action, what about God's justice? Is there many God or only single God? Yeah? Is God totally omniscient? He knows everything from the very beginning to the end. Is he omnipotent? This is the classical discourse of Kalam about God. And then with regard to man, so what is the nature of man? What about human action? Is he free? Is he predetermined? Yeah? Is he created? Is he destined? Or he is totally free? Yeah? Af'alul ibad ni. Yep. And then nature, al-kaun. What is the nature? What is the nature? Typo there. What is the nature? Why there is diversity in nature? Why is there their status? The sun, the moon, the animals, the plants, are they part of creation? Are they responsible or not? What they are supposed to, what's their role? What's their function? Are they responsible or not? Yeah? Are they created? How did they come into existence? How did diversity in nature come into existence? Is it a matter of coincidence? Is it fated? Is it measured? Yeah? Why the nature has to be the way she is? Yeah? So you find that I sum up all these questions into 4 important guiding themes. If I were to analyze all these questions in a broader perspective, so I divided them into these 4 themes: ontological, yeah, epistemological, teleological, and axiological. Now I'm going to use these themes to analyze religious pluralism. Yeah? Okay, is it possible for me to develop a systematic argument to analyze religious pluralism? Yep. Let's see. So, using the theme ontological as a theme, I'll try to find the meaning of religious pluralism. Okay? What is the meaning of religious pluralism? This is unavoidable. So I just cannot be satisfied if someone tell me religious pluralism is religious plurality. My God, this is a very big philosophy. And I cannot be as simplistic as that. I really have to go into the deep meaning of this philosophy. Then I'm doing justice to the philosophy. Yeah, so I cannot accept if someone say religious pluralism is religious plurality. It is not. Yeah. So is there any single meaning? I'll show you that religious pluralism is pregnant of meaning. It's a heavy loaded philosophy and term. What are epistemologically, what are the sources of religious pluralism? Being one of the modern philosophy. What are the sources upon which its meaning is derived? And I said clearly from the very beginning, and I talk about modern and tradition. What are the differences between modern epistemology and traditional epistemology? Of course, there are differences. Of course, it implicates the meaning if you use different epistemology. Thirdly, axiological, which is value judgment, very, very important in Kalam. So I'm sorry I cannot suspend my judgment because I'm using Kalam, and Kalam is full of value judgment, and it is a must. And of course, in comparative religion, this is not appreciated. That's why Dr. Amran said just now, normativity is given bad meaning. Whereas, you are rightly addressed it, Dr. Amran. In other sciences, normativity is needed. But why not in religion? And Faruqi says, MashaAllah, religion talks about the truth, religion talks about meaning, and you don't want to talk about right and wrong. So what religion is? Simply mechanical? Religion is not mechanical. Religion gives us meaning, and this meaning has to be verified. I cannot simply describe the meaning as it is without propagating its value. And we have to be very brave. Scholars, Muslim scholars of comparative religion has to be brave to take this position. And it's not easy, especially when you are writing for international journals, because you are expected to be neutral, to be not biased. Yeah, and that's what I actually experienced in sharing my perspective and trying to get my work published in international journal, because it seems very incompatible to their objective. And finally, the purpose, theological. So in Kalam also, we talk about the purpose. Okay? Yeah? What are the objectives of religious pluralism? Why there is a need for plural truth? Why God create many religions? Yeah? Why the many truth claims? Should we stop the many truth claims? Why they exist in the first place? Okay, so let's go one by one. I hope I have enough time, but I'm going to be very, very quick lah, because I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Amali as well. So, when in my study or analysis of religious pluralism, I found that people give different meanings to religious pluralism. So the most important meaning, but most of the time neglected, would be its philosophical meaning. The one offered by John Hick, Peter Bryan, Ellen Rice, Leonard Swidler. Yeah? And one that is controversial, some people prefers those who belong to this esoteric school, Fridtjof Schwann, Chittik, Syed Hussein Nasr. I, for one, the fan of Syed Hussein Nasr, but with exception though. It's theosophical interpretation of religious pluralism. And of course, the recently the recently findings, my findings, Diana L. also propagated religious pluralism, and she subscribed to its literal meaning, which is religious plurality. I found that she acknowledged the contribution of John Hick, but she commented on John Hick's conception of philosophy of religious pluralism, and I thought to a certain extent she is objective, because most of the time when I read people's definition and conception of religious pluralism, they forget to acknowledge its philosophical meaning. But Diana L. rightly, accepted John Hick and criticized John Hick and developed from there. Yeah? But she's also very much constrained with the context. I'll talk about it later. And I think one of the reasons why religious pluralism, people buy the idea of religious pluralism now, is because of interreligious dialogue. Because towards the end of his life, John Hick, based on his experience leading one of the movement on interreligious movement in Birmingham, he started to talk about religious pluralism and dialogue. But then he died. But anyway, he moved from theological framework of religious pluralism to the dialogical framework, but he did not develop that far because he died. Now, I want to show you this. This is my presentations in the other conference. If we, in my opinion, if we simply shut down John Hick, it's very unfair to him, because he has developed his discourse very long time and was very, very serious. I have listed here his book, very profound. God and the Universe of Faith, God Has Many Names, Problems of Religious Pluralism, and Interpretation of Religions, the whole lots about religious pluralism, the Rainbow of Faith. He's very serious, man. And this is the one, as I mentioned now, I need not to repeat this, but he rejected Karl Barth, one of the famous modern theologian, because Karl Barth promoted, exclusivism, and Karl Barth back up exclusivism in Christianity using the doctrine of incarnation. Yeah. Well, what is incarnation? That for you to figure out. Yeah. But I would like to say that in Christianity, if incarnation is discarded, then you don't have Trinity altogether. It's very central doctrine in Christianity. But then John Hick, interestingly, John Hick challenged this traditional understanding of incarnation. He and a number of friends wrote books and articles to tell the Christian, now look, you have to review the traditional understanding of incarnation. So he wrote this, The Myth of God Incarnate. And then the myth of Christian uniqueness, because incarnation made Christianity very unique. That matters. So he criticized the idea of Christian as unique, and then the metaphor of God incarnate, in which he redefined what incarnation means. Traditionally, incarnation means that Jesus Christ being incarnated, is God incarnate. Yeah. But then, to cut short the story, John Hick says that it's not the physical Jesus, his body, or this man in the form of God. As a matter of fact, it is his love. His love. So incarnation talks about the love of God. It's not the real Jesus. So this is very radical. Radical for a Christian theologian, graduated from the seminary, teaching theology, teaching philosophy. And he had to pay a lot of price. He was excommunicated. He was regarded a blasphemous person. He was blasphemed by the Church of England, one of the churches in England, Anglican Church. And then he was not allowed to teach religion. Yeah? But this guy, mashallah, seriously, somehow I am impressed with him. Yeah? So he developed lots of philosophical arguments to justify religious pluralism. He said Christianity or the Christians have to do transformation, a very radical transformation in understanding Christian theology, without which you will not be able to understand why God creates many religions. You're going to start with this idea that if you're Christian, you go to heaven, but my God, there are so many bad Christians and there are so many good non-Christians, and what? They are going to hell? This is a thing that John Hick cannot make sense of. And therefore, he formulated religious wisdom. He said, well, now I believe that there are many paths to the truth. And this truth, the way it is in different religions, are different manifestations. It's human understanding of God in different ways. God is far and above, and human is trying very hard to interpret him. They interpret him differently, and that's why they find different paths. They found different paths to him. So it's the bottom-up effort to understand the transcendent, and that's the reason why he thought that these are all the many paths to the same truth. Yeah? In one of my classes, I said, Hick used this analogy, the seven blind men. Well, he's actually benefiting from Rumi's analogy about someone who tried to understand the elephant, whether, the shape of the elephant, the size of the elephant, the ontology of an elephant. So these seven blind men were touching different parts of the elephant, and they gave their own interpretation of what elephant is. So I asked my students, so what do you think? Just imagine all these blind men are people of religions. Would you regard we Muslims as one of these men? Do you think that we are blind? Are we blind? As Muslims, can we agree to accept that we are all blind, that the truth that we perceive is only partial truth? It's our interpolation, our interpretation. It's all our projection. I think that's the reason why I have a lot of problems with religious pluralism. Because it's it's a lot to pay as a Muslim. And this Diana she started off, she's an academic, she's with Harvard University, so you know how good Harvard University is. She started off the Pluralism project in 1991. Many Muslim scholars, especially American Muslim scholars, resorted to Diana and Malaysian scholars also refer to Diana without referring to John Hill. How is this possible in academia? This is what the thing that I cannot praise. I cannot bring. Yeah. Of course, she developed this pluralism project. She got lots of funding. Yeah. And she brought religious pluralism from its theological backdrop to dialogue and social engagement, being so pragmatic. And you know how America is, very pragmatic country, pragmatic philosophy, and now they are promoting religious pluralism. Last year I tried my luck. It was a program that invited scholars all over the world, and this was hosted by the US embassies all over the world. And the American government is trying to promote religious pluralism and to show us how religious pluralism is a workable policy in the US. So they want to promote this philosophy. I tried my luck. I applied with the American embassy. I was lucky. I was selected to be one of the participants, of which I would get the first-hand ideas about religious pluralism, modes of operation, so on and so forth in America. But it was a very exhaustive program, like 8 weeks in the US, and it was held in Ramadan and Idul Fitri, so I missed that opportunity. It was sad thing for me to happen, because otherwise I would have able to get the first-hand ideas about how religious pluralism is now and how the American society benefited from the project. Yeah? So my point here is that I can refer to the other paper, why I think had given this a fresher perspective of religious pluralism, because she used religious pluralism in comparison to Hicks, who was disturbed with the theological dilemma of salvation. Ed was more challenged with the social reality of the American multicultural and multi-religious society. She acknowledged that Hicks nailed the point as he urged for a revolution in the understanding of God. However, she thought that Hicks' Copernican theory or transformation has failed to address the reality of diversity that is taking place in this world, which is the dynamic interaction of the many religions. Hicks was so obsessed with the question of salvation. He forgot to find meanings in the dynamic interaction between the people of religions. Yeah? So, I would want to bring religious pluralism into the problem of relationship with one another, people of religions living in coexistence. And in his opinion, that pluralism requires participation, positive engagement, not mere recognition of the differences, but the effort to understand differences and commonalities through dialogue. And this, according to her, is a normative aspect of religious pluralism. In comparison to or opposite to Hicks' versions of non-normative religious pluralism. So Hicks says it's non-normative because all pertain to the truth, but Ed say that her version of religious pluralism is still normative because it talks about positive engagement, about positive living together. Okay. So, well, that's what I regard as a fresher perspective, except that I think we have also to understand the American context. Yeah? I don't know, maybe Trump is not an immigrant. But you know how America is. The only native people in America would be the Red Indian. So the whole lots of Americans are actually immigrants. Diana discussed this very well in his work, in her work. Apa tajuk dia? spiritual journey from Bozeman to Banaras. So she said that, well, you have different types of Christians in America, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, and under the different churches also you have different approaches, yeah. And then you have these Catholics from different part of the world, from Europe, from South America, from North America, yeah. And she said that actually from the very beginning it was not the struggle between Christians and non-Christians in America. It was a struggle between and among the Christian churches themselves. So it was very hard for the country to unite these churches. That's the real problem of Christianity. And of course later on the complexities were there because immigrants from different parts of the world. You have Muslims, you have Indo-Pakistani Muslims, you have the Malay Muslims, you have all this complexity. So America was in dire need of a philosophy that can help to unite them. And religious freedom being a pragmatic philosophy in line with American pragmatism. So I would say that the reason why Diana LI used this philosophy is because of its pragmatic meaning. Yeah? And let's take a look at Muslim pluralists. Yeah? I listed here Osman Bakar, Mahmud Ayub, Hashim Kamali. These are the Muslim philosophers who take the meaning of religious pluralism as religious plurality. Yeah? Take the meaning as literally. And you have a scholar like Muhammad Legenhausen. He defined his version of religious pluralism as non-reductive pluralism. What he means by non-reductive pluralism is that you're not looking at religion merely as human institution, but you're looking at religion also as revelation. Yeah? And Abdul Aziz Sachedina promoted Quranic pluralism. This is his version. And Arif Kamil Abdullah, the author of this book, this is the recent discussion. Muslim scholars discuss, use this normative religious pluralism against non-normative religious pluralism. So you find that Muslim scholars, or in general scholars, divided opinion, position on religious freedom. Either they fully accept it, either they rejected it, or either they modify it. Most of them modify. So these were among the pluralists. In general, they accepted it, but with a number of different approaches and modifications of the ideas. So in Malaysia, what about in Malaysia? In my literature, I found that all these resort to the literal meaning of religious pluralism. So that is how religious pluralism is pictured in Malaysia. Religious pluralism as religious purity. Yeah? So you can find Osman Bakar and Hashim Kamali. So in my conversation with Osman Bakar, I remember this was way back in 2002, 2003, when I was writing my thesis. I made use of Professor Osman Bakar's work. He was at Temple University, Georgetown. Yeah, at Georgetown University. I wrote an email, a very nice student of PhD, sending email to a professor at Georgetown. I didn't expect to get his response, but I still remember and appreciate him until today. That's why today, even sometimes I receive email from students from nowhere. I still reply to the email because I remember that Prof. Osman Bakar replied my email. I was so, thankful to him. We actually discussed over the email, and I actually criticized him. Why, Prof? You agree with this? And he said, Haslina, it's simple. You have to redefine. So of course I have respect for his ideas, but as someone who has studied this philosophy, I think I have right also to say my position. Yeah, with due respect. So these are the works. But I think if you this is the work of, maybe I should go back to my previous slides. Sorry about that. I told you I'm a bit disorientation. Okay, now epistemological. Let me see to make sure that I am on track, so I don't merapu. So epistemologically, how I'm going to present my ideas, how I'm going to present my challenge to religious pluralism. Of all the Kalam themes I have selected today, this theme is the axis of my overall critiques to religious pluralism. So religious pluralism has epistemological problem. I have clearly stated earlier that the grandstand of religious pluralism, which is, I plainly state it as a modern philosophy. And this explains how intimate it is with modern epistemology. The episteme, the system of understanding that is built upon a clear-cut demarcation between the sacred and the profane. So this is what I normally draw in class. This is a modern episteme. The two parallel lines that do not meet each other, the sacred and the profane. So the sacred is responsible to produce traditional sciences, religious studies, Quranic studies, theology for that matter. And profane is responsible to develop all these modern sciences. And there is no meeting point between the two. Yeah. So the modern sciences boast of what we call that scientific approach. Let me read. Has the divisions between what has been regarded as transcendent, to sacred, beyond history, from that is profane, mundane history, which is subject to time and space. All modern sciences claim to belong to the profane domain, therefore they are objective, descriptive, and neutral. These are some of the definitions offered to explain what has been regarded as scientific, hence academic. Therefore, comparative religion has to belong to this perspective. And traditional sciences, which unfortunately, including religious sciences, are deemed non-objective, normative, biased. Theology and Kalam, the one that I am presenting today, being one of the victims of such an epistemological demarcation. So you can guess now that I'm using Kalam. If the modern sciences regarded Kalam as belong to the sacred sciences, it's normative. Then I'm using, according to them, wrong glasses to analyze modern philosophy. So I am ready to accept that disqualification, because this is what I'm presenting. This is what I mean by intellectual veracity, and I have to be brave enough to say this. And then, the option remains now is to study religion under modern sciences. So, you are convinced that religion are acceptable as long as they make sense to your reasoning and experience, which is not wrong altogether, but somewhat distorted as it is too obsessed with human orientation. So you study religion because psychologically human need it, sociologically people need it. That's what Emily Durkheim said. The gravest impact of this obsession is when religions are seen as merely the product of human endeavors, and that is the most justified reason for the plurality of religion. So the reason why we differ is because all the modern sciences develop study on religions here. And this is a full-fledged human understanding of religion. So it's human interest, human orientation, anthropological, anthropocentric outlook of the religions. So you forget this one. Wilfred Canal may say that this is not disclosed to you. This is beyond human comprehension. It belongs to the transcendent. Wilfred Canal may say, you do not know your faith. In the morning, your faith is, high. In the afternoon, your faith is slightly down. You yourself do not know your faith. So there's a lot of things about religion that you are uncertain about. So we just study what you can be certain about. Then you have this reductionist approach to religion, theology, psychology, philosophy, and whatnot. And the gravest impact of this obsession is when religions are seen as merely the product of human endeavors, and that's what John Hick perceived. religion as human endeavors, and that's what also Wilfred Cantwell Smith perceived. And that is the most justified reason for the plurality of religions. Well, an advanced analysis of this make-believe idea would help us to realize its flaw. Islam, for that matter, is not a mere product of human ideas and actions. Most importantly, it is revelation. It's not exclusive revelation. It's a universal one that surpasses time and space factor. When Muslims talk of Islamic tradition, it does not talk about the purely cumulative human endeavor. Rather, we believe that it is the work of ijtihad, sound reasoning guided by the Quran and Hadith principles, guided by revelation. As a matter of fact, the whole lot of Islamic sciences can never separate themselves from relating to revelation. So what? You're saying that Islamic sciences are not acceptable? Of course, there are avenues for differences. In fiqh, you have lots of differences, even in Usuluddin. So therefore we have Mu'tazilites, therefore you have Hanabalites and Ash'arites. Within Ash'arites also you find differences. But epistemologically they are integrated. That is acceptable. Yeah. Okay, then teleological salvation as a purpose. I mean, simply, let me be very simplistic here. I do not know my fate. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Muslim. Of course, we pray that we go to Jannah, but we do not know for certain. So how do we know about others? Well, salvation being the problematic theology of Christianity, because it says that if you're Christian, you go to heaven. But what if you're a bad Christian? You go to heaven as well? I think this is the most dilemma of faith, because he met many good non-Christians. So he challenged his own Christian theology. And of course, the questions of the truth. Kalam helped us to understand that the truth is verifiable. And what about the many truths? The Quran helped us to understand the many truths. The Quran also helped us to understand that if we do good deeds, Allah will repay us. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمَلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. For me, it's enough. A single verse, mashallah, for me it's enough for me to understand that, mashallah, with Allah's grace, people of other regions can enter Jannah. Can they? They can, because it's God's business. Salvation is God's business. It's not our business. A problem with Christianity is that they play God. That's why they are stuck. And that's why I'm not concerned about this issue of salvation. It's not our business altogether. How to make sense of the many truths? Faruqi mentions also about this. Faruqi talks about the historical intervention, human role, so on and so forth. So, and tolerance and coexistence, this is another purpose of religious pluralism. Yeah? And Diana LX, as I mentioned just now, take religious pluralism as a pragmatic philosophy, devoid of theological importance. She said this very clearly. I'm not going to tackle this theological meaning of religious pluralism. Yeah? So whether we take it at the face of evolution of definition or meaning, or we take it as a distorted understanding of religious pluralism together. My question is very simple. Yeah? Is she or many of us doing justice to the philosophy, being academics? And finally, value judgment, good versus evil. It's interesting to find that John Haidt, before he developed his argument on religious pluralism, he wrote a book about good and evil, Christian theodicy. He has a dilemma long before he settled down to religious pluralism. Now, if salvation is really the issue, why God does not save everybody else? And especially in Christianity, God is a God of love. And why he punishes people? Is God just? Of course, in Islam we believe that God is just. That's why if you do good, Allah will reward you. That is our answer. Yeah. But we can never say that, oh, you go to heaven. I think in this regard, Mu'tazilah had a problem. I think that is the way when Mu'tazilah got so stuck, because it goes to the extreme of very determined about human fate or destiny. Should there be only one way of salvation? Others will not be saved. Yeah? What makes man choose his way of salvation? Is he responsible for his choice? Why were we Muslims? Why some other people are Christians? John Hicks said that, it's because by coincidence. He said, it's the fortuity of birth. You are fortunate, you are born in Saudi, you are Muslim. Fortunate, you are born in Malaysia, you are Muslim. You are fortunate, you are born in America, you are Christians. But we know that وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَلِيَشْهَدَهُمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى شَهِدْنَا. Every man from the very beginning is a Muslim. So God is not biased. But we Muslims wrong. We fail ourselves because we don't communicate the religion. So many people do not know Islam because we fail to do our role. And many of the non-Muslims are looking forward to know what Islam is all about. But we fail to communicate. We live in exclusion. We think that Islam is, an exclusive religion of Muslims. We became Christians, just like the Christians. Does man commit evil if he made the wrong choice? Unfortunately, you're Christian, so you make the wrong choice, you're bad. What if his choice was predestined? What if he is free? All these questions will deal with in Kalam, and you will find your answer. Alright? So should I tell about this? What is Kalam now? Why I am so convinced with Kalam, Dr. Amran? Yes? So I'm so convinced with Kalam, even before Dr. Amran came to see me and invited me to join his project, I've already, developed my understanding of Usuluddin of Kalam. Because I think the only way for you to convince yourself to get back on track is to come back to the tradition. Kalam, a systematic, dialectical, argumentative method in theology developed in the form of dialogue to contest or defend one's religious doctrine and creeds by means of rational argumentation. It's not dogmatic. Kalam is not dogmatic, but the Western scholars, modern scholars, claim that Kalam is dogmatic, indoctrination, so on and so forth. Is it polemical and apologetic? Many Western modern scholars say this. So, for example, Wardenberg had a lot of grudge over Kalam. This is what I have presented in the previous presentation. So how did the Mutakalimun approach the issue of the truth in other regions? Was there a single method? Tak lah. There was not a single method. So let me show you briefly. I choose only 3. So you have Ibn Hazm, you have Biruni, you have Shahrustani. They were adopting different approaches and methods altogether. So you will find Ibn Hazm very stern and very garang, against Christianity, but you find that Al-Biruni very empathic, respectful to the Hindus, join the Hindu circle, and Shahrustani very descriptive, encyclopedic. So in Kalam we have these different approaches. Why the Western modern scholars rejected Kalam? And then what does the tradition of Kalam teaches us? So I'm about to conclude. So people say that it is polemical and apologetic. But it was in Kalam that the Abrahamic theologians, Christian, Jewish theologians, Muslim theologians demonstrated a profound interreligious encounter within the spirit of intellectual subtlety in the service of God or religion. They were constantly in defense of God's sovereignty, whether they were Christians, whether they were Jews, whether they were Muslims. When they use Kalam, they intend to defend God's sovereignty in comparison to today's modern sciences. When they develop the sciences, they aim to defend man's sovereignty. The revisit of Kalam is urgent. So man's sovereignty under all the banner lah, human right lah, freedom lah, tolerance lah, and whatnot. So no one is interested in God because Nietzsche say God is dead. Why care? Why do we care? Yeah. So the revisit of Kalam is urgent, for it is an abandoned tradition peculiar to the Abrahamic religion that is loaded with intellectual vocation that deter dogmatism in religion, not dogmatic. Yeah? It was in Kalam that the Abrahamic religions developed its interreligious discourses within intellectual openness and veracity. MashaAllah, Jewish theologian, Christian theologian, Muslim theologian developed their scholarships. That kind of openness was there before by means of Kalam. But today we thought that Kalam made us stuck. Why? There is a need to revive theology and specifically Kalam to acknowledge its role for bringing in transformation in the way religions and religious truths are studied epistemologically and methodologically. So in reality, Kalam has been ventured by the Muslim, Christian and Jewish theologian from the 6th to 12th century. Scholarly inquiries into interreligious issues were attempted with a strong element of jidal, debate, instead of dialogue. Yeah? In fact, Kalam is also embedded with the Greek logic, Islamic logic that stimulate for intellectual openness in interreligious discourses among the themes of it. Because I have the last one. Okay, my conclusion for today's presentation. Yeah? So religious pluralism is a heavy loaded term. The labeling of religious pluralism with religious plurality is disturbing as it ignores the epistemological, theological aspects involved in the formulation of the former. Religious pluralism is a modern philosophy for understanding religious plurality, the byproduct of combination of circumstances, modern philosophy, and the study of religions, colonialism, emigration, and globalization, and it has provided more avenues for interreligious encounter. Yeah? All these recent phenomena. Many pluralists resorted to its superficial meaning for pragmatic reason. In the least, an objective inquiry into the philosophy should not be abandon the root problem that bring about this philosophy, which is a problem in Christian theology, problem of salvation. We should be able to differentiate between taking plurality as a phenomenon and as an ism or ideology or philosophy. Religious pluralism poses problems to the Muslims as it has origin in Christian theology. It upholds the ideas of many paths to the truth. It propagates truth and religion as human institution, and a systematic and sound reasoning developed under Kalam may help to unfold the challenges it poses to the Muslim faith. I think that's about it. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Haslina, for the informative and delightful presentation. I now open the floor for question and answer. For those who would like to direct question to our speaker, try and introduce your name briefly and state the question in a clear manner. Question?
We carry on with the
Just short.
Wait, yeah, I have a very short question. Yes?
Can I?
Yes. Salam.
So I am Muhammad Asdullah from Kulia of Engineering, pursuing my PhD. My question is, when you talk about the modern science and when you talk about the traditional sciences, am I the right person from Kulia of Engineering to understand the traditional sciences? Is it because you have gone deep into the research? And are the people who are studying about religion having the right position to understand the modern science? Because modern science, scientific theory rejects the idea of believing in God and faith.
Not necessarily, brother.
I'm just putting a question. So let it be first understood. It's not like, it is important, I think, to have a background from where we are putting the question. So I have studied, myself taught 17 years in university, and but that time we didn't have the requirement of PhD. So now I'm about to submit my thesis, but still I see, and I'm not a traditional Muslim. My parents are Hindus.
Oriented in traditional studies, that's why.
No, even my background, I'm a reverted Muslim. So my background, I don't have like, I took it from my parents or something. But I still see, when it comes, there are so many problems, basic theories you want to change it. And you are talking about a person who wrote a lot of things and the Western people have rejected it. Why can't we have a religious model, not Islamization, a religious model which does cover the religious part, gives us people from religious giving us outputs where they preserve the religion. Their work is to preserve the religion. And the modern sciences, we should not try to Islamize the engineering process. If there is nothing wrong, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave in everything in stages. There is first stage, second stage, Musa alayhi salam came, Isa alayhi salam came, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, and finally we got the absolute truth. If we see all the prophets, it's in stages. So when we talk about pluralism, why don't we say there is a part of Hinduism which is true? Because if there is no idols, for the new generation to come, it will be very difficult to accept Quran as absolute truth when Quran says reject the idol worshippers. Because they will say, how can a human being worship idols? But there Allah has only kept these idols, so it's one stage. The second stage might be when we talk about Musa alayhi salam or Isa alayhi salam or some prophets. Quran doesn't explain everything, details, but we get some historic background. There's another stage, and there's a third stage, and finally when we come to the absolute truth, then we are in a condition to tell them, see, Islam has given answers to all the queries. So, how do you see all these things? Because when you explain about all these theories, I will be not in a condition from the religious perspective to explain like you have put some critics.
I don't know whether I can explain this or not. But the dichotomy of education makes us like this.
The system itself is...
the system, the way we divide knowledge, from sciences stream or from religious stream, I for once the victim of that system. But anyway, but somehow, if I'm giving you another question, like, somehow we have to respect the scholarship or the professionalism of these scholars. Like, if I were graduated from Usuluddin, and can I say something about medic? Of course, in terms of professionalism, you have to respect people's professionalism. But as a person who is seeking knowledge, a seeker of the truth, there is no limit for you to learn. It's just a matter whether you want a written black and white certificate, or you just attend, these courses like this to make you more knowledgeable, so you are versatile. When you address your students especially, you have more informations and explanations. They sound subtle and profound to your students. Like recently, I was so amazed when I attended Professor Basil Atoi. He talks about the theory of Big Bang. It's something that, as Muslims, I'm very straightforward. This is wrong, because you come from someone who does not believe in God. That's it, finished. But then Professor Basil Atoi developed an argument that made me, mashallah, this is scientific argument that prove, even to the extent of which modern scientists believe in accuracy, there is still possibility that that he is wrong. You can prove he is wrong. Because this idea of butterfly wing, even in the most accuracy aspect of science, we have developed this argument of butterfly wing. The theory of Big Bang is justified based on this idea of butterfly wing, like the Big Bang, and then the world become as it is out of this argument of butterfly wing. You do not know how the butterfly would flap its wing, so that probabilities brought about this universe. But mashallah, the Quran says, وَقَدَّرَ اللَّهُ تَقْدِيرًا. Allah has created the world in accurate measure. Of course, as a students of religion, وَقَدَّرَ اللَّهُ تَقْدِيرًا, mashallah, I think is, literally, mashallah, I believe. But now I am more convinced that this idea of butterfly wing cannot be taken because Allah creates the universe in accurate measure. It's not probability that bring about the universe as propagated by modern scientists about the existence of the world. You know, because when people challenge them, they say there is probability that brought about this idea of the Big Bang. But there is very, very, very minute percentage of probability. How come that minute percentage of probability you cannot explore this idea of butterfly wing can bring about, mashallah, the accurate measure of this universe with all the planets, with all the orbits, so on and so forth. A single verses of the Quran would help to challenge that idea of butterfly wings or probability, mashallah. So you see, what I'm trying to say, of course I'm not a scientist, but when I attended these lectures, I can help to, you know, reinforce my understanding, my belief, and mashallah, my students are benefiting from me. So there is no limit.
Yeah, of course. It was
So don't.
My point was not on you.
Okay.
I'm just saying as a layman for anybody to understand.
Oh no, you're not layman, you're a professor.
As a scientist, for me as a scientist, I will say,
yeah.
I will say, science is based on hypothesis.
Mm.
There is no one absolute theory in science which doesn't change. So we know science is full of uncertainty. But you told religious theories.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean to say, for me, I see science data which is acquired 50, 20 years back. I want to do some experiment and validate it with that wrong data and get the results, which again is a fake. So this full chain is a big mafia, which even now Harvard, Cambridge and all these big shots are also in question mark. So this system is totally wrong. We don't have Islamic model actually. So what I was saying is, do you have a model which just lets us see, instead of from Kalam's eye, bird's view, instead of him, we can see it from the Islamic perspective. So because Islam always talk, like you said, we have revealed knowledge, we have absolute truth. So have we not done, or we have done something?
I think we actually exhaust our energy talking about model, you know, whether Islamization project is right or wrong, whether Kalam project is right or wrong. Mashallah, brother. Islam for me is a process. We are reaching towards an ideal. There can always be improvement, attempts, ijtihad. These are all ijtihad. You cannot come to that ideal because the only ideal is God. But we are inspired by those ideals, so we try. We do lots of ijtihad, and this Kalam initiative is ijtihad. The Islamization project is regardless of how many people commented it or criticized it or say it's a failure. MashaAllah. If we are so much disturbed by this, when are we going to be successful? Then we will not move. We will not come to that perfect model. MashaAllah, you believe me? Because we are all human. These are all attempts.
We have human, but
Inshallah.
we have only Quran.
So
we have only Quran, which is
but
perfect.
then that Quran has to be spelled out, and we are very limited people. So you know, like myself, I'm so into Kalam, and you know, even Kalam, my passion is in comparative religion, Dr. Amila in ethics. So everybody do it, and yours in engineering, mashallah, subhanallah.
You see, in this world, if you see 100 years old scientist, he was religious, he was physician, he was an engineer.
That's very ideal. Alhamdulillah, mashallah.
Okay.
Mashallah.
Yes, Dr. Amila. Okay, I want to respond. To some extent, actually, I agree with you, and I can see the point that you want to make, in which it is actually a very important aim and objective of Kalam, actually, to make us to understand the relationship between revelation and reason. So I believe it has been always there, between how to link between religion, revelation, and what's going on in our daily life. I mean, in physics, in everything, there are theories, new theories. But I think what you need is about a kind of explanation on the harmonious between religion and science. In a maybe I do not know what to say, because if you look into the Kalam discussions, you will see that they will go into very controversial issues, you see, as if maybe many people cannot see the meaning of this. But even in the discussion before, when Dr. Haslina discussed about the epistemology, etc., you can see this is actually what we want to do. But we need people, we need more people, and we need a lot of efforts. And I can say that not many are interested in this, and this is what I can see the limitation that we have. We're trying actually. So hopefully one day you will see and actually effort like Professor Basil. I believe it is a very Basil Atta is a very important one out of maybe inshallah will be many if many interested in this field.
I always envy people from science streams, you see.
I think just a small comment. I think we shouldn't bog down with this idea of dichotomy, sacred knowledge, prophet knowledge, traditional, or this modern, because all are mixed up. Even the so-called traditional knowledge are basically human also involved, tafsir, hadith. So there is no such thing as traditional Islamic ideal knowledge, purely from God. No, even tafsir, hadith, it's all the scholars are doing that. They do a lot of deduction, estimate. So the same with physics. Even the very hardcore sciences, the full of metaphysics or the practitioner. So I think we shouldn't really demarcate between the so-called traditional, purely sacred knowledge and this highly modern kind of human knowledge. All knowledge are basically this human element. Yeah, maybe some are basically more religious infused, more religious component. But all human knowledge are basically human construction, human work in it. Yeah. I think we shouldn't idealize certain form of knowledge. Yeah? I think that if not, we are stuck. So we always try to look down the so-called Western or modern, while we put very high the so-called traditional knowledge, but in very old fashion. Yeah? We become stuck in the mutun, in the text, because we think these are sacred, so we cannot do anything, we cannot change, we cannot improve. Maybe after this. Yeah. It's okay. We go.
Okay. So if there is no more question, and now I close the Q&A session for now. Now I would like to thank you for the second speaker of the presentation.
There is a question. If you have time, do you have time or not?
Yeah, we go for second.
Can
Sure.
for the second question and answer?
I don't have any problem, but you said if there is no, then you said if there is time, I don't have a problem. If you say no,
2 minutes.
you proceed.
Okay, but I can open one question for you since the family want to prepare. Yes. Then question more.
I'm going to prepare my.
No, sister, I wanted to ask a question, but then you said we don't have time, we proceed. Now you said that you're open for a question.
Because the family wants to prepare.
Maybe while
That
he
is not
is
proper. I wanted to address it to
Yeah,
Trustee.
you may address the question because
No,
I'm now
while
preparing.
preparing.
Maybe later.
Yeah.
I can ask you.
You can.
No, no.
That's okay. We proceed with it.
Okay. So we have our Assistant Professor Dr. Noor Amali to deliver his presentation entitled Survey on the Development of Kalam in the Islamic Tradition.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli, amma ba'd. My respected Dr. Amra Muhammad, the chairman and the chief executive officer of EC, Dr. Amilah Awang, the head of the Department of Usuluddin and Comparative Religion, Dr. Haslina Ibrahim, my fellow academic staff, my beloved students, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning to share with you my humble knowledge regarding the historical dimension of Kalam. The topic given to me by the organizer is a survey of the historical development of Kalam in Islamic tradition. So I think it's such a broad topic indeed, right? If I teach this topic, it will take about one semester, okay? And it might be extended to at least 1 year, okay, to discuss this topic. And I'm a bit dilemma, in fact, to what limit of the development of Kalam I should cover. However, I will try to summarize and cram in all the important milestones of the development of Kalam. And I hope my presentation today will do justice to the topic within the prescribed time limit. The outline of my presentation today will be as follows. You need to be patient with my laptop, IIUM laptop. All right, the outlines of my presentation today is the first one will be an introduction, and then I will talk about what constitutes Kalam, and the next point is about what triggers the emergence and development of Kalam, and then the development or historical glimpse of Ilmul Kalam up to the 7th century of Hijrah. So I'm not covering the development of Kalam after 7th century. Perhaps if there is an extension of this program later, we may cover up this period. And then conclusion. But before moving further, I would like to share with you the wisdom of my late professor in Fan, okay, regarding religious thought, because Kalam is a kind of religious thought developed by Muslim scholars, and it has a certain characteristic. he said in his lectures, it is unpublished lectures in the class during my time, during my PhD time. He says that إن الفكر الديني في مجموعه فروض وتقديرات وآراء واجتهادات تدور كلها في فلك الإمكان والاحتمال. When he talked about religious thought, is something related to the hypothesis, it's something related to the prediction, it's something related to views, ijtihad. So these are what constitute religious thought. And these are also what constitutes kalam itself. So it's subject to true and false, close to the truth or far away from truth, because it's the product of human outcome, rational thinking of human beings. And he also mentioned that religious thought is wahdatun murakkabatun mu'aqqadatun namiyatun mutatawwiratun bistimrar. This kind of religious thought, they are in fact in continuous development. Okay? It never live in a sealed compartment, but it is a kind of continuous development, responding to certain challenges that encountered by the thought itself. So this is the nature of religious thought, and this is the nature of ilmul kalam itself. As a background of this presentation, I do know what's
Can you put it out and then again you do it? So, now I think I did it.
how to make it big. So looking at the Prophet's lifetime, we may say that he is the source of reference for everything. He welded the community of believers regardless of their race, tribes, or nationality. And we may find that the glue cemented the unity of the Ummah is Al-Quran Al-Karim and Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can I use? Yes.
Can you use that? Then you can read from your laptop.
Yeah. the Prophet's time, he was the source of reference for Muslim. He managed to make people united using his wisdom, using the guidance of Al-Quran al-Karim. However, upon the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are turning point happened in the intellectual history of Muslim community. There are numerous issues emerged after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Imamah is in the forefront, followed by the discussion on Iman and Kufur raised by Khawarij, and then continued by Murji'ah, and also the discussion on man's actions and its relationship with God's actions and many other issues. This happened after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we may find that there are internal and external factors that contribute to this division of the Ummah. And amidst Muslims' interplay with all those causes and problems, Ilmul Kalam emerged in the landscape of Islamic tradition, and Ilmul Kalam offer its different ways and approaches to bring about Muslim communities to the original track in matters of belief. So this is the general overview before we detail up further about all this kind of development. Why is it important to understand and to know the historical background of Kalam? So I want to share with you the wisdom of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali in his work Maqasidul Falasifa. He mentioned about the importance of comprehending all the particulars about certain groups, certain schools of thought before we give our comments, before we give our judgment. He said in his this important work, Maqasidul Falasifa, he said that إن الوقوف على فساد المذهب قبل الإحاطة بمداركه محال بل رمي في العماية والضلال. To give judgment, to give assessment on the error of certain school of thought or certain mazhab before we fully comprehend about the details of that particular mazhab, it is considered as is a flaw and blind accusation, So it is important before we give any comments about Mu'tazila, about Qadariyah, about Jabariyah, and whatsoever, so to understand fully the background of these schools, or otherwise, Imam Ghazali said, "Ramyun fil imayati wa dalal." We have this kind of blind accusation. Okay, we give this unsubstantiated judgment to these schools of thought. Dr. Haslina just now pointed out the meaning of Ilmul Kalam, and based on the definition given by her, we may discuss about the elements that constitutes Ilmul Kalam. And these elements that constitutes Ilmul Kalam derive from the definition given by Al-Farabi, Al-Ghazali, Al-Munqis min Al-Ghazali, Al-Iji, Taftazani, and many others. When they give the definition of Ilmul Kalam, it seems that there are similarities between those definitions. So what we may derive from those definitions is that Ilmul Kalam involve discussion on theological matters. So it is not talking about any practical aspects of Islam related to Sharia, related to Akhlaq. It is a discussion on theological matters. And it uses argument with rational proofs. And then it is related to the question of why do we believe instead of what do we supposed to believe. So it is what we call now the kebat question, higher order thinking question, okay, about why do we believe. It is ilmul kalam instead of what do we supposed to believe. It is the level of ilmul aqidah and ilmu usuluddin. So ilmul kalam is a higher level than ilmul aqidah, because ilmul aqidah is only talk about what do we supposed to believe. Ilmul kalam give the justification, rational justification of what we, why do we believe. And it is important to highlight from the definitions of ilmul kalam itself, the dual interwoven roles of ilmul kalam. The first one, ilmul kalam, its role is to defend the articles of faith, isbat al-aqaid al-diniyah, and at the same time to refute all contradictory opinions to the established faith. So ilmul kalam is requires someone to master and fully understand his own articles of faith, and at the same time it requires the person himself to know other beliefs that contradict to the articles of faith, and this requires extensive learning. It requires a fully understand of the articles of faith itself, the truth itself. So I used to advise my students, in order to be scholars in Usuluddin, to be scholars in Ilmul Kalam, you need to have this dual orientation. Okay? You have the ability to defend your articles of faith, and you also have the ability to refute all contradictory opinions to the established faith. And having this kind of definition, okay, Ilmul Kalam is relevant today because we exposed to many ideas contradict to the established faith, right? We are living now under the imprisonment of truth relativism. So it is important now we use Ilmul Kalam as a tool to counter this kind of contradictory opinions to the established faith. What triggers the emergence and development of Kalam? So, based on the readings of various books of Usuluddin, Ilmul Kalam, from the classical works and the contemporary works on Ilmul Kalam, we may find that there are two important factors that I categorize it into two. The first one is internal factors. The second one is external factors. Of course, in internal factors represented, we may find that the triggers Ilmul Kalam is Al-Quran Al-Karim, the tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the polemics over imamah. This constitutes the internal factors contribute to the emergence and development of Kalam. For external factors, I just limit the discussion today to two. The first one is the influence of other religions, and the second one is the translation of Greek and Syriac traditions. But when we look at the works done by the Orientalists, such as Joseph Wen S, Medallion, Michael Cook, they come up with the idea that whatever development happened in Islamic thought, it is because of external factors. Internal factors have no contribution at all in the development of Ilmul Kalam. what I can find from these statements by the Western scholars, it implicitly describes the non-originality of Muslims intellectuals. This is what they want to say, okay? When they highlight that everything in Islam derived from external influences, so we may suspect they have certain agenda. Okay? The first, I may arrive to the conclusion that they try to highlight the non-originality of Muslims' intellectual traditions. Everything related to Islam is derived and originated from external sources, meaning that there is no such creativity in Muslims' mind. Everything cut and paste, borrowed from other traditions. The second implicit agenda that I can sense is that an attempt to highlight the supremacy of the Western intellectual traditions in general and Christian legacy in particular as the origin of all thoughts. This is my ijtihad when I read the works of those scholars when they talk about the development of Islamic thought, to highlight the supremacy of the West, and also to address the supremacy of Christian traditions. Of course, we are not denying the external influences that trigger the development of Islamic thought, but we found that internal factors towards the development of Ilmul Kalam emerged earlier. The discussion on Iman and its relationship with Amal, the discussion on the predestination, free will and predestination, they are emerged earlier before Muslim communities being influenced by other traditions. They are predated external factors and played significantly towards the development of Islamic thought. So when we look at the Quran as external factors of the development of Ilmul Kalam, we may find that the seeds of the later development of Kalam and its methodology are traceable in the Quran. First, Quran contains plenty of verses which appeal to human reasoning. Afala yanzurun, afala tatafakkarun, afala yanzuruna ila al-ibil kayfa khuliqat wa ila as-sama' kayfa khuliqat wa ila al-ardi kayfa sutihat. These are the verses appeal to human reasoning. It developed this kind of inquisitive mind in the Muslim communities. And then Al-Quran also provides rational arguments to establish the articles of faith. For example, when Al-Quran talk about Malaika, for example, there are rational arguments presented by Al-Quran Al-Karim to confirm the truth about the angels. Okay. For example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that if angels were sent as a prophets to the mankind in the forms of mankind, for example, people will reject them. People will reject them. There are two possibilities: whether the angels they were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their original forms. Men are not having opportunity to get access to angels. If they are sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in man's form, people will reject it as they reject the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the forms of men. So these are, and also we find the idea of resurrection. There are backup with rational argument. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He established the idea of His oneness, Allah mentioned that لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَ. If there are many gods, there will be perish in the earth and and in the heaven, in this universe. And there are also verses in the Quran that trigger the development of ilmul kalam later, such as the verses related to the act of man. It looks like the act of man is preordained, and that man is subordinate to God's will. Okay? By pondering upon these verses, we may find the development of Jabarites and Qadarites in the landscape of Islamic thought. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. It seems that these verses implied the action of man is determined by Allah. And there are another verses, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ رَهِينًا. So it's related to the man has free will, okay, to do his actions. And then we may find that Al-Quran also contains mutashabihat, ambiguous expressions in the Quranic verses, and that requires further interpretation. And this leads to the emergence of what we call the group of muta'awwilun, okay? the group of people who promote the idea of allegorical interpretation, and the group who are accept the mutashabihat as they are without any allegorical interpretation. We may find in the Quran as well the methodology of da'wah that should be done by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam bil hikmah wal mau'izatil hasanah wal mujadalah billatihi ahsan. So mujadalah billatihi ahsan becomes the basis of the development of kalam later. This is the Quran al-Karim. And when we look at the works, the writings of Al-Qushayri regarding Al-Quran al-Karim, he mentioned that one is surprised by those who say that there is no ilmul kalam in the Quran, when the verses dealing with al-ahkam al-shar'iyyah are limited, while those that draw attention to principles of the faith far exceed them. The discussion on aqidah dominated the verses of Al-Quran compared to the discussion on ahkam al-shar'iyyah. Also, Ar-Razi also share the same concern. Prophetic traditions also can be described as the seeds to the development of ilmul kalam, because the belief system has been explained by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning, during the early development of Islam itself, okay, and it becoming the main theme during Meccan's periods. The understanding of Aqidah is well taken care of by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this early stage. And there are also engagement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in various theological issues in many occasions. For example, the discussion of qadar during the times of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Prophet during that time show his anger when he find that the companions are discussing about the issue of qadar, and he highlighted the risk of being astray by the deep investigating of the issues. So the Prophet ﷺ want to highlight the idea that qadar is the secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Prophet always direct them to the most beneficial attitude. For example, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to his companions when they are discussing about qadar, ضَلَّتِ الْأُمَمُ قَبْلَكُمْ. The previous nations, they become astray because they are having differences with their prophets, and they have the tendency to indulge in mutashabihat matters, and he direct the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to focus on something which is more important, right? And then when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam engaged with his people, his companions, he answered whatever questions comes from them, unless they went beyond human knowledge. For example, regarding the idea of the hour when it will be, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam abstained himself and avoid the Sahaba from discussing such matter, because he have no knowledge about that. So what's the point of keep on discussing about that? Even when Jibril alayhi salam asked him about mata sa'ah, he mentioned the words mal mas'ulu anha bi'a'lama minas sa'il. But there are occasions that when the Sahaba ask him about the hour of judgment, he redirect the question to the most important one. What have you prepared for it? Which is more important than knowing the time of the hour. There are also theological discussions with non-Muslim, and this kind of discussion has constituted the development of Ilmul Kalam later, such as the discussion between the Prophets sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the delegation from Najran headed by their chiefs Al-Aqib and As-Sayyid, where well-known story mentioned by Ibn Kathir in his Tafsirul Quran al-Azim. So these are the second factor, internal factor. The third internal factor, we may find the most popular one discussed by the historians of Iraq, polemics on imamah. Ash'ari mentioned about this polemic, and the turning point that arise from this polemic. He mentioned that awwalu khilafin bainal muslim, inna awwala khilafin bainal muslim khilafun ba'da wafatin Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam khilafun hawla al-imamah. So the first polemic emerged in the history of Islam is the polemic on imamah. Who is supposed to be imam, khalifa after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, between Ansar and Muhajirin, okay, in Saqifah Bani Sa'idah. And also Shahrastani mentioned about this. He even said that ma sulla sayfun ala qa'idatin diniyya misla ma sulla hawla al-imamah. The first sword has ever been drawn in Islam on the religious question as it has been drawn at all times on the question of imamah. It is political events, but later on it turned to be theological polemics between companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It leads to the discussion on the relationship between iman and amal, okay, later. In these polemics, okay, early polemics regarding the imamah, it was not allowed to result in any immediate development of ideas. There is no theological issues arise. Abu Bakr able to resolve the polemics, okay, and people agreed to appoint him as a Khalifa. And then he himself appointed Omar ibn al-Khattab as a Khalifa after him. Okay. So there is no immediate development of ideas during that time. It resolved successfully by the wisdom of those Khalifa. But the polemic that creates these theological issues happen after the battles of the Camel and Siffin, Ma'rakatul Jamal wa Ma'rakatul Siffin. We know that in Ma'rakatul Jamal it involved Ali, Talha, Zubair and Aisha, and Siffin between Ali and Muawiyah. It triggers the development of many theological discussion after that. It formed the groups of Shia, Khawarij, and then later on Murji'ah, and they are having their distinctive doctrines on Imamah and the discussion between the relationship between Iman and Amal. And the idea of takfir of others also happened during this time, led by Khawarij. Okay. External influences. Upon extension of Islamic territory, Muslims were exposed to a larger extent of others' culture, religions, and worldviews. And there are many Jews, Christians, and Magians, they are embrace Islam. But the problem with those people is they are still clinging to the remnants of their culture, beliefs, and religions. When they understand Islam, they try to understand it within their own framework, okay? Within their own framework. In this interactions between Muslim and the influence of other cultures, we may find that the issue such as free will and predestination develop in the Islamic thought. And also the discussion on the attributes of God, are they detached from the essence of God, or are they attached and blended together? So this happened upon the interaction between Muslim and other religions. Apart from those who sincerely embrace Islam, there are others who enter the fold of the religion insincerely. They have other evil agenda to divert Muslims from their religion and to spread the deviated ideas among Muslim countries. This also contribute to the development of Ilmul Kalam. For example, Abdullah ibn Saba, for example, the founder of Shia Sabaiyah, one of the important, the extreme group in Shia, Ibn Rawandi in Mu'tazila, and also other figures responsible to form Mushabbiha and Mujassima in the early development of Islamic thought. We may find that the Persian influence also leads to the creating the idea of that imamah should be inherited. Okay? It comes from the Persian traditions. And also the idea of charismatic leader, okay? the one that contribute to the formation of Shiites belief also comes from the Persian traditions, meaning that leader should have these charismatic characteristics, and then they develop the idea of Ismatul A'imma, because how come we cannot accept the leader as have charismatic leadership if they are not free from any sins. So they come up with the idea of Ismatul A'imma. So these are the ideas derived from the Persian traditions. It is not there in our Islamic traditions. Translation also important and plays important role in the development of Ilmul Kalam. It's happened during Islamic expansion. Muslim read the works of other people, other civilization, and most importantly, they come to terms with Greek philosophy, Greek legacy, and they translate all these works into Arabic. During the expansion of Islam to Egypt, for example, there was a library, namely Maktabah al-Iskandariyah, where Greek philosophical works were kept there, and Muslims benefit very much from the literatures in this Maktabah. And during the expansion of Islam also, Muslims exposed to the writings on medicine by Galen, Aristotle, Plato, etc. And we may find the active translation activities done by, initiated by Abbasid Khalif. They hired renowned translators, and they are non-Muslim translators. Yahya ibn al-Bitrik, Abdullah ibn al-Muqaffa, Hussein ibn Ishaq, Yahya ibn Adi, and many others. Translation is important where Muslim able to access to the knowledge of others. And in the process of this benefiting of the knowledge of others, the ideas, the worldviews, the philosophies of others also assimilated in the Western, in the body of the Muslim knowledge. And then it happened actively during the Abbasid period, as we mentioned earlier. So these are the discussion on the factors. Now we look at the developments and the important milestone experienced by Ilmul Kalam itself. We started from the age of uniformity and conformity. Okay. Professor Irfan before used to highlight this terminology to describe the period of the prophets and his companions. He attribute this age as the age of uniformity and conformity, because Muslim people during that time, they united in the belief taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were guided by the teachings of the Al-Quranul Karim. Okay. This age started from the 1st century of Hijrah, from 1 Hijrah to 40 Hijrah, and then because of internal and external factors, the Ilmul Kalam began to take place. We look at the Umayyad period, we call it as the age of diversity, and we witness the arrival of Kalam during this times period. And then move to the Abbasid period, where Ilmul Kalam is where the period is considered as the golden age of Ilmul Kalam, with the advent of many scholars, with the extensive literatures have been produced by the scholars during that time, Abbasid period. So we may find the rise of many schools of thought, and Mu'tazilah during that time became the most dominant, especially under the patronage of Abbasid Khalifa, 3 Abbasid Khalifa during that time. And then we may find in this Abbasid period as well the decadence of Mu'tazilah because of certain approaches that they have done, which contribute to their own decadence. And we may find the rise of Ash'arites and Maturidites after that. So this is a very superficial graph, because when I look at the graph prepared by Dr. Amran, it is very, very detailed. All right. So these are the details of every stages in the development of Ilmul Kalam that I have mentioned in the graph. The era of the Prophet and companions, it can be characterized as uniformity and conformity, no speculative discussions in doctrinal matters. Belief of the Muslim communities at that time was plain. They had nothing except the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is interesting words, okay, expressed by Tash Kubrazada in his work Miftahus Sa'ada. He mentioned that this spirit of conformity as due to the close attachment of early Muslims to revelation, because they experience the revelation, they have the experience of having a close companionship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he mentioned that the light of companionship has indeed removed, and the darkness of doubts and illusions also removed during this period of time. Of course, after the demise of the Prophet, issues arisen among the companions, but they were mainly related to practical matters. During the times of Abu Bakr, for example, he is busy to tackle the issue of those who refuse to pay zakah, for example. It is a matter of practical aspects, practical matters, not theological matters. And if there are discussions about Aqidah, there will not a deep discussion, there will not a prolonged argument. Okay? For example, Abu Bakr, when he talked about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be likened with his creation, he used a very simple words, and everything resolved. Okay? He used the words al-ajzu an darkil idraki idraku. Very simple words, but it is meaningful indeed. Al-ajzu, the inability, and idrak, and darkil idrak, to comprehend the suratullah, the image of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are not able to comprehend the essence of Allah. We are not able to comprehend whatever related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is idrak, according to Abu Bakr. It is a real knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be likened with any of his creation. A very simple words, but it is meaningful and understandable by the people at that time. So they requires not to engage further in this kind of discussion. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, in response to a question related to the punishment of God to the preordained action of man, he also used a very simple words, and it is accepted by the mainstream during that time. No need to have extensive argument about this issue. He mentioned, Qadarallah haythu alima wa azzaba haythu lam yazlim. Okay, so these are the words that resolve resolve any conflict. Umayyad's period, the starting age of diversity, we may find a massive expansion of Islamic territories and larger scale of interaction between Muslim communities and others at that time. The emergence of manifold problems related to Aqidah, widespread of tense arguments and counter-arguments among Muslims using real and rational basis taken place during this Umayyad's period. So there are paradigm shift between the age of the prophets and companions and this Umayyad's period. This contributed to the division of Muslim communities, the arrival of different schools with their distinctive identities. There are schools of thought which is political based, namely Shia and Khawarij. There are other schools which is religious, intellectual based, okay? Qadarites, Jabarites, Murji'ites, and Mu'tazilites. So Muhammad Abu Zahra, in his work Tarikh al-Mazahib al-Islamiyah, he classified the groups emerged in the schools in the development of Islamic thought because of having these two inclinations. The first one is political based origin, and then religious intellectual base. Right? Issues arisen during this Umayyad's time, Qada and Qadar, raised by Ma'bad al-Juhani, continued later by Ghailan al-Dimashqi, the creation of Al-Quran and the attributes of God, raised by Ja'ad bin Dirham and continued by Jahm bin Safwan, and also the punishment of grave sinners, iman and amal, championed by Khawarij and Murji'at. For Khawarij, those who commit grave sins, for example, they are considered as infidel, they will be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permanently, okay, in the hellfire. For Murji'at, they come up with the idea that iman and amal is something separated. Okay? If a person, for example, commit sinful actions, it never affect his iman. His iman is remain intact like iman of Abu Bakr, Umar, and Osman. This is the Murji'ites thinking. It is believed that Kalam emerged amidst this period of time. There were literatures on Kalam produced during this Umayyad's time, but we are not able to trace those works anymore. Okay? Perhaps it's lost somewhere during the Abbasids time, during Holago. Okay? Many factors. So when we refer to the works of the historiographers, we may find that when they talk about the starting point of the emergence of Ilmul Kalam in its official appearance, they will say that it is during the times of the arrival of Mu'tazilite, the arrival of Qadarites, في حدود المئة من الهجرة in the late of the first century of Islam, and they attribute the starting point of emergence of Kalam with Mu'tazila, and to be specific, during the time of Wasil ibn Atta. Abbasids until 7th century, the time at which intellectual activity among Muslims was at its most dynamic stage. I mentioned before, it is the golden age of the development of Islamic disciplines, including Ilmul Kalam. Literatures on Kalam has been extensively produced by their respective scholars. We may find the names of the scholars represent different schools of thought, and various literatures has been produced by them. And when we look at the rise of Mu'tazila, they have a great influence during Abbasids' time, especially under the three Abbasi Khalif, Al-Ma'mun, Al-Mu'tasim, Al-Wathiq. And they benefited from the movement of Greek philosophy and scientific works translated into Arabic. And they began to delve into the discussion on philosophical ideas, such as the discussion on atom, the discussion on Ara, the discussion on Jawhar, and many other discussions that have not been exposed to during the times of Umayyah. These are the trios of Mu'tazilites. Okay, Abu Huzayl al-Allaf, Al-Nazam, Muammar ibn Abbad al-Sulami. And then, when we look at the major themes covered by Mu'tazila, they have this idea of denial, the beatific vision of God. They talk about the creation of Al-Quran. They talk about free will. They talk about Al-Lutful Ilahi. Al-Lutful Ilahi means that they come up with the idea that it is compulsory for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do good and to bring goodness, okay, to people, including the sending of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sending of the Prophet is compulsory for Allah according to Mu'tazilah. So this is the flaws of Mu'tazilah, to force Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send a Prophet alayhi wassalatu wassalam. But it is important for Mu'tazilah for God to send the prophets, because it will make people close to Allah. So this is the idea that constitutes al-lutful ilahi in the discourse of Mu'tazilah. And also the attributes of God were not distinct entities. They are in fact the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So the discussion of as-sifat ainuz-zat has been debated, has been highlighted by Mu'tazilah during these times. And values of actions are intrinsic and cannot be discerned by human reason. Can be discerned by human reason. At-tahsin and at-taqbih al-aqliyaini is the another themes covered by Mu'tazilah. They say that good and bad can be determined by our own reason. So these major themes of Mu'tazilah Kalam, guided by Al-Usul al-Khamsa, and their general approach is to give a rationally coherent account of Islamic beliefs. After this trial of Mu'tazilah, there remained only a slight modification, elaboration, and defense of their doctrines by other Mu'tazilite mutakallimun. And there are two schools of Mu'tazilah emerged in the history of Islamic thought: Mu'tazilatul Basra and Mu'tazilatul Baghdad. And in the 3rd century, with the coming of Al-Mutawakkil to power, the Mu'tazilah lost the patronage of the state, and since they had no popular support. So it is important that to make sure the views or any ideologies that we want to spread, it has backup from the political institutions. Okay? This is in the history, Mu'tazilah became prominent because of the backup, of the support or the patronage from the three Abbasid Khalif. But when Mutawakkils come, so he have this inclination to support Ahlul Hadith. So Mu'tazilah has no longer given a due treatment during his time. So by the time of Abu Ali al-Jubai, a new era during which Mu'tazilah quickly receded had begun. The rise of Ash'arism was one of the most prominent disciples of the great Mu'tazilah of Basra, Abu Ali al-Jubai, since his childhood up to around the age of 40 years, after claiming to have converted to the camp of traditionalists, who were mainly followers of Ibn Hanbal. Al-Ash'ari devoted himself to the intellectual defense of the theological position held by the traditionalists. Although his teachings were clearly opposed to the views of Mu'tazilah, that was not enough to convince the Hanbalites, who were especially unhappy with the very important role he assigned to reason in his methodology. So what makes Ash'ari difference from Hanbalite school of thought is he give the reason its due priority, he give the reason its right, and revelation its right. So he is in a mediating position between Mu'tazilah and Ahlul Hadith. It can be argued that by combining reason and revelation or tradition, he managed to overcome the shortcoming of both, thereby putting Kalam on a very firm basis. So these are the Ash'arites. With respect to the content of Al-Kalam, Al-Ash'ari took up all that had been generally accepted as the subject matter of his science up to his time. This included the nature of God and his attributes, divine speech, and the status of Al-Quran. But worth to note that Ash'ari maintained the wasatiyah, okay, when he discussed about these issues between Mu'tazilites and other groups. He has promoted the idea of wasatiyah between Khawarij, okay, between Murji'ah, between many other groups, not only Mu'tazilite. For example, about those who commit sinful actions, for example, Ash'ari maintains that it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him if he commit, and it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give mercy upon him. But if Allah decide him to be in the hellfire, he will be punished in the hellfire for the certain periods of time. They will not be permanently in the hellfire. They will be brought by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Jannah later, as opposed to the idea of Khawarij, as opposed to the idea of Mu'tazilite in matters related to Murtakibul Kabira. And many other dimensions highlighted by Al-Imam Abul Hasan Al-Ash'ari. And these Ash'arites developed very active during the Abbasides time, and they come up with the systematization of their schools of thought. We have early Ash'arites, we have later Ash'arites, and they also get support from Khalifa. And we also have at the same time the rise of Maturidism. Maturidism also come up with the idea of wasatiyah, like Al-Ash'ari, although there are differences between Ash'arites and Maturidites in certain dimension of Kalam, but wasatiyah is there. So, as a conclusion to my presentation today, first, I highlight here that Kalam emerged in the past as an intellectual response to the emerging theological problems. This is the first point that I want to say. And then, Kalam has its precedence in our tradition. If we say that Kalam is something new and has no roots in our tradition, it is wrong to say that, because if we look at the Quran, if we look at the tradition, the six of Kalams are there. It has precedence in our tradition, and throughout its development, it has taken its wisdom from external influences too. The approaches of Kalam are varied between the rigid, intermediate, and excessive use of reason. As Kalam played its respective role in the past, Kalam also should be revived in our present time and to be promoted via different mechanisms. Particularly in the time religion is at risk of losing its status as self-evident truth nowadays. Religion is at risk of losing its status of self-evident truth. Religion always being brought by people in the accused case in the court, for example, and it has been accused with many accusations, and now it is our responsibility to liberate our religion from this case of the accused. And also the world is in critical juncture towards accommodating the idea of truth relativity. This is the risk faced by the challenge faced by religion that requires the intervention of Ilmul Kalam. Taking into account Kalam's status as the outcome of man's thinking, the only approach that should be embraced today and in the future is Kalam, which is steered by the Quranic framework, and guided by prophetic tradition, which is Sunni Kalam that we need to highlight it now, not Kalam Shi'i and not Kalam Mu'tazila, not Kalam Khawarij, not Kalam Murji'ah, as it is the only approach that representing and preserving wasatiyah of Islam in its discourse. I think that's all my presentation today. A very superficial, jumping, bumping, and that's all. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you very much, Dr.